In the year 1945, Japan was in ruins. 2 cities had been vaporized in 3 days. 67 others were ash. 3 million people were dead. The economy had collapsed. The military was gone. And the man considered a living god was about to go on radio to tell his people they had lost. Most nations don't survive that. Japan did. Not only did it survive, it built the second largest economy on Earth from scratch. But here's what no one asks. How was Japan even capable of that kind of resurrection? The answer doesn't begin in 1945. It begins long before skyscrapers, before empires, before samurai swords. It begins on a chain of volcanic islands where the ground itself tried to kill the people who lived on it. Look at Japan on a map. 4 main islands, thousands of smaller ones, stretched like a crooked spine along the Pacific's edge. Now look closer. 73% of that land is mountains. Farmable soil covers barely a fraction of the surface. The islands sit on the collision point of 4 tectonic plates. Japan experiences roughly 1,500 earthquakes every single year. It contains more than 100 active volcanoes. Typhoons assault the coastline annually. By every logical measure, this is not a place where a great civilization should have taken root. And yet, it did. Why? Because geography doesn't just create hardship. Sometimes it creates character. When your land can be taken by nature at any moment, you stop treating permanence as a given. You plan for collapse. You develop a psychological relationship with impermanence. The Japanese call it mono no aware, the bittersweet awareness that all things pass. It is not resignation, it is preparation, and it would become one of Japan's most powerful hidden advantages. Archaeologists believe humans have inhabited these islands for 30,000 years. The earliest culture, the Jomon, left behind remarkable pottery. Pottery requires patience, craft, and the belief that tomorrow will come. It suggests a people not merely surviving but creating. Then, 2,300 years ago, the Yayoi arrived from the mainland, bringing rice agriculture, bronze tools, and new social structures. They didn't erase what came before. They merged with it, creating a hybrid civilization that transformed foreign ideas into something distinctly Japanese. The borrowed idea would always end up more Japanese than the original. Understand that, and you begin to understand everything.
To understand why Japan made the choices it made in war, in peace, in crisis, you first have to understand how Japan understood the world. Most early civilizations placed their gods above nature. Japan placed its gods inside nature. Shinto teaches that divine forces, called kami, inhabit everything: mountains, rivers, trees, the wind moving across water, the silence between sounds. This is not metaphor. For much of Japanese history, it was literal belief, and it produced a culture with a profoundly different relationship to the natural world. While other societies built walls against nature, Japan built rituals to honor it. Hundreds of shrines were constructed at the foot of volcanoes, not because they wanted to live near danger, but because danger demanded acknowledgement. There is a Shinto concept called ma, the sacred space between things, the pause, the interval. It teaches that what is left out is as important as what is put in. You can see it in architecture, gardens, and poetry. You can see it in how Japan rebuilds after disaster, not frantically, but deliberately honoring what was destroyed before constructing what comes next. A civilization shaped by Shinto doesn't fight against the collapse. It learns to survive it. For nearly 700 years, Japan was not governed by emperors or elected officials. It was governed by warriors. The samurai class rose from the chaos of the late Heian period. Feudal lords needed armed men to control land and project power. What emerged was not merely a military caste. It became a moral system, Bushido, the way of the warrior, codified values that would shape Japan long after the last sword was sheathed. Loyalty above personal survival, discipline as a daily practice, perfection pursued not for recognition, but for its own sake, and death approached not with fear, but with preparation. In many ways, Bushido was Japan's first management philosophy. The same principles governed how a samurai trained would later appear in how Japanese factory workers approach quality control, how engineers designed bullet trains, how companies organized their workers into teams bound by mutual obligation. The sword changed shape, the ethic remained, but Bushido carried a shadow too. Its demand for absolute loyalty would prove catastrophic when combined with 20th century nationalism. The belief that dying for the emperor was not tragedy, but honor. That collision between discipline and destruction is coming, but not yet. In 1635, Japan made a decision that would define the next centuries. It closed itself off from the world. The Tokugawa shogunate, fearing outside influence, imposed a policy called Sakoku, literally, locked country. Foreign ships were turned away. Japanese citizens were forbidden from traveling abroad. Foreign trade was restricted to a single small island off Nagasaki, controlled, monitored, minimal. For 220 years, Japan essentially vanished from global history, and in some ways, it worked. The country experienced relative peace. Arts flourished: kabuki theater, woodblock printing, haiku poetry, elaborate tea ceremony. A distinctly Japanese urban culture developed in cities like Edo, which would eventually become Tokyo. But outside those sealed borders, the world was accelerating. Steam engines, steel warships, industrial production, modern medicine, rifles, artillery. While Japan perfected the arrangement of stones in a garden, Britain was building the system that would control a third of the world. Isolation had preserved Japan, but it had also left Japan completely unprepared for what was coming. And what was coming wasn't a request.
Before the First Empire, before the First War, before the economic miracle, there was just an island people trying to survive. They survived earthquakes by building in wood, light enough to fall without killing everyone. They survived volcanic soil by terracing mountain slopes into rice paddies. They survived cultural isolation by developing inner life, art, ritual, poetry, philosophy. They survived the samurai era by encoding its discipline into cultural DNA. Every hardship left a deposit. Every disaster carved a deeper channel. And slowly, across thousands of years, Japan became something unusual. A society that treated catastrophe not as the end of a story, but as the beginning of the next one. That instinct to rebuild, to adapt, to transform is not something you can manufacture during a crisis. It has to be practiced across generations. Japan practiced it for 30,000 years, which is why when the worst crisis in its history finally arrived, and it would be worse than anything those early islanders could imagine, Japan had a depth of resilience that no one, including Japan's enemies, fully understood, including Japan itself. On the afternoon of July 8, 1853, 4 warships appeared in the Bay of Iraga, just south of Edo. They were American. They were steam-powered. They were unlike anything Japan had ever seen. Their guns were aimed at the shore, and their commander, Commodore Matthew Perry, carried a letter from the President of the United States. The letter was not a greeting. It was a demand. Open your ports. Open your markets. Open your country. Or else. Japan had 2 choices, and both of them would change the world.